In this little video, I want to show you a little bit more about how the JavaScript fetch method works in two little demos. One where I perform a GET request to the server, and the server responds, and then with a POST. Let's start then with the GET. Here, I click on Get Joe, and then the server replies with a response, and I process the reply and display it on the screen. Let's see how that's done. So here we are in index.html, and there's a Get Joe button right here and a Show Person div right here, which is where the Joe and his age showed up. Get Joe calls this function here, Get Joe, which in turn calls a fetch method, and then the fetch method is requesting the Get Joe URL on the server. And let's go look at what the server has in the Get Joe view, which is this right here. And what the Get Joe view does on the server, this is Node.js, by the way, instantiation object, adds attributes to that object, Joe and age. And then what it does is it serializes the object. It turns it into a string. Okay, this is what this line is doing right here. And then it returns that as a response back to the client. And then if we go back into our fetch in the client, we've made the request to Get Joe, and then this code looks for the response, and this is the response right here. We can look at it in the console. It turns that that response back into an object. This is what it's doing here, and then we can display the object in the console. And then it finds the first name attribute of the object and the age attribute of the object and displays it, on the screen. Let's actually look at what that response looks like in the actual console. So here's the response, and what you can see is that it's got a lot of junk in it, or stuff that we're not interested in. And so that's why we apply this was returned in the console, and that's why we actually apply this JSON method to it, which then just returns the object that we're interested in. That's then processed here. You can see that object outputted, and then again we put it we display it on the screen. Now these fetch methods can also not just request data from the server, but they can actually send data to the server. So let's look at that next, okay? Here, and we do that with a POST instead, okay? And here we're posting a Joe object to the server and then retrieving it, and then what we're seeing what's returned is we're just showing the Joe attribute, and then we're posting a Mary object to the server and retrieving it, and here the Mary's first name is displayed, and you can see also in the console, also this worked with Joe, the full object is being displayed. Let's see how that is actually accomplished in the fetch request. So here we have two buttons, one to post the Joe object to the server, and let's look at that one first. We're calling the person function and passing in a Joe parameter. By the way, we're doing the same thing with Mary, only we're passing in a Mary parameter. And then we go up to the person function. We're passing in that person name. We're instantiating a user based on whether it was Mary or Joe that was passed in, and we're changing the first name attribute to Mary or Joe. And then here what we do is we are stringifying that user object. So we're turning it into a string that can then be sent via HTTP to the server, okay? And that's the request. And then let's look at what the server does with this post to a demo post view. And here's the demo post, and we're just instantiating the object almost the same way we did it with the get. Only notice that what we did is we're looking at the request body, and then we're getting the first name attribute that was sent over, and then putting it back in the first name attribute of the object, and then stringifying, serializing the object again, and sending it back to the client. And everything else is the same as this, as in the other GET request. So let's run it again, and we get Joe, or we get Mary, or we get Mary.